I'm Marcia Bistrin. I'm president of the New York League of Conservation Voters. Glad you're all here. It was 6 years ago, almost to the day, that Mayor Bloomberg launched Plan YC, a comprehensive plan to grow New York City sustainably and also to combat the challenges of climate change. Today, that effort and planning for the future of the city couldn't be more urgent. There are people in the city who are still struggling with the consequences of Sandy. I'd like to acknowledge, I think there are folks in the room from the Rockaways, from Broad Channel and Staten Island. We're glad you're with us here today. New York has a lot of work ahead. From our perspective, that effort should build on the principles of Plan YC, but with a renewed sense of urgency and, for that matter, creativity. For all the challenges that Sandy brought, the storms also brought an opportunity to act and an opportunity to lead. We're pleased to be here with so many friends from the business community, from the worlds of government advocacy, and of course, philanthropy. And I would be remiss not to acknowledge my board and its chairman, Kevin Corbett, and the team at AECOM. And with that, Bob Yarrow.
Very good. Thank you, Marcia. Thanks, Marcia. I'm Bob Yarrow, president of Regional Plan Association. We're delighted to be here today with you and the League of Conservation Voters to welcome Mayor Bloomberg and to participate in this important discussion. I also wanted to recognize Lee Sander, the chairman of Regional Plan Association. Thanks, Lee, and thanks, Kevin. New York is a city that's always looked to the future and welcomed change and innovation. We now need to apply that spirit to one of the greatest challenges we've ever faced, climate change. It's vital that we develop new approaches to the way we build our homes, offices, roads, subways, and ports to make them more resilient to storms, like the one that we've just experienced. At the same time, we need to be taking aggressive steps to reduce our carbon emissions. The only way we will succeed is if we work as a city and a region together with government, business, civic groups, and private citizens coming together to protect and enhance our communities. And if we fail to act, as Hurricane Sandy has shown, we are putting our economy, our way of life, and indeed the lives of our citizens at risk. I'd like to introduce Michael Brune, who is Executive Director of the Sierra Club, has been relentless in raising public awareness about the threats to our environment. Michael?
Morning, everyone. It's good to be here today. And it's also good to be here in Lower Manhattan and see a little bit of the progress that's been made in just a short period of time in the aftermath of the storm. I'm, as Bob mentioned, Executive Director of the Sierra Club, and I'm actually the second Executive Director to come and introduce the mayor. My predecessor, Carl Pope, also flew out across the country to introduce the mayor back in 2006 to help to launch the city's new Green Building Initiative. And whereas Hurricane Sandy has served as a wake-up call and a reminder to millions of Americans that the threat of climate change is real, this is a lesson that Mayor Bloomberg never forgot. And in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, we should remember that it wasn't one of the candidates who made climate change a central issue in the presidential election. It was Mike Bloomberg. This is an issue that is personal for me, as it is perhaps for many of you. I grew up on the Jersey Shore in a small town called Chadwick Beach, New Jersey. And Chadwick Beach, for those of you who don't know, is located on one of the barrier islands in New Jersey. It's about halfway between Manahawkin, which is where the ocean met the bay and created a new inlet, washed out the bridge and a handful of homes, and Seaside Heights, which is the place where the roller coaster is now a water slide. Chadwick Beach is the place where my family moved back in 1965. My father built the house that we grew up in. It's a place where they raised 4 children. My wife and I, we come back from California. We take our kids to the Jersey Shore every year. And it's a place that has been completely gutted. completely devastated. Everybody had to evacuate, as they did in low-lying areas here in New York, and nobody has been allowed back in the 6 weeks since. There's no gas, no power, no water. If you drive down the Garden State Parkway, if you take exit 82, drive down Route 37, cross over the Toms River Bridge, and go north on Route 35, you will see mile after mile after mile of houses that have been damaged by the storm. On the right side, on the ocean side, almost every house has either been demolished or has suffered from serious damage. And then on the left side, on the bay side, which is where my parents' house is, along the shores of the Barnegat Bay, just about every house has severe damage from flooding. And you can tell, you can't see this when you fly over, but you can see it from the ground because every house, almost every house, has their entire front floor out on the curb. The biggest damage right now that you see on the shore is of mold, and it's spreading rapidly. So I went with my sister and my parents. We were allowed to go back in for just a couple hours a few weeks ago, and everything on the first floor was destroyed. We had to take out all of the drywall, all of the rugs, rip up the floorboards, all of the appliances, the electrical systems, the plumbing on the first floor, rip it all out, and every single house is having to do the same thing. We lost some of my grandparents' photographs, our great-grandparents' photographs. My grandfather grew up in North Jersey and used to shine shoes when he was a kid to make a couple nickels here in New York City, and we saved his old shoe shine box. That's been destroyed as well. We saw houses that of our friends and neighbors that were floating in Barnegat Bay. We saw other houses that had washed up onto the highway. We saw boats on train tracks. Our neighbor across the street has a new Boston whaler right in its front yard, and nobody knows whose boat it is. So if you're missing a Boston whaler, please come see me after the show. We're not the only victims of climate change across the country, and the mayor, to be clear, isn't the only person who has warned of the costs of a destabilized climate. But the mayor is in very rare company when it comes to taking real, substantial action on climate change. It was the mayor back in 2006 who warned that sea levels at the Battery were a foot higher than they were 90 years ago. And it was the mayor who a year later launched Plan YC, which has become one of the most ambitious and arguably the most successful climate action plans across the country. This is an action plan that has now gone viral. Through the mayor's leadership in the C40 initiative, they've built a network of 63 of the largest cities across the country that have benchmarked their greenhouse gas emissions, that have begun to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and are accelerating a transition away from dirty fuels towards clean energy and towards sustainable transportation. This isn't the only thing that the mayor has done. We've also partnered with the mayor at the Sierra Club on our Beyond Coal initiative, where we have been able, over the last few years, to stop the construction of 173 new coal-fired power plants all across the country. We've also been able to secure the retirement of 125 of the oldest, largest, and dirtiest coal plants across the U.S. Collectively, what this has done is it's taken coal as a percentage of power production in the United States from 52% to below 36% today. And that reduction in coal use is one of the reasons why the United States, one of the largest reasons why the United States has reduced its greenhouse gas emissions more than any other country in the world. More than any other country in the world. And so we know, after years of working on climate change and observing the cost of climate change, that it's not going to be an international treaty that will solve this issue, although we do need an international treaty. We know that putting a price on carbon here in the United States also won't solve this issue automatically. What we need is real, measurable, and substantial results. And city by city and plant by plant, this is what the mayor has been able to help deliver. So for those of you who are working on climate change or have been affected by climate change, what you should remember is that the mayor has been able to recognize this issue, recognize the threat, institute a strong plan for action, and has been persistent and relentless and successful at beginning a clean energy transition. So I know that that gives me a lot of hope, and I hope it does for all of you. Thank you.
And now it is our distinct pleasure to introduce our special guest, Vice President Al Gore, who's going to appear.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Marcia Bistrin and Bob Yarrow, my friend Michael Brune, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, my heart goes out to all of those who have suffered such grievous losses, particularly those who have lost loved ones and those who have lost their homes, and many of them feel as if they've lost a lifetime of memories and building and dreams. My respect and admiration to the first responders, the rescuers, to those who are even now continuing to help to feed people and make sure that their needs are met, and to those who are in the cleanup crew. I want to particularly thank the mayor for his outstanding leadership, and I'm going to return to that in just a moment. I'm grateful to be invited by the mayor to come and say just a few words here, and I'm going to introduce him in just a moment. But I do want to say that in the focus that is appropriately being put on how to recover and how to prepare for other such storms in the future and other climate-related impacts, New York City is very fortunate to have Mayor Bloomberg's leadership in organizing and driving and leading this effort. But as he himself has frequently pointed out, we also at the same time have to take steps to reduce the chance that even worse impacts will happen in the future. This storm was related to global warming. The scientists used to say some years ago that you can't blame any single extreme weather event on climate. Now, many of the leaders like Jim Hansen, Kevin Trenberth, and others are saying, no, we've gone beyond that now. It's gotten too far. Because that we're putting 90 million tons of global warming pollution into the atmosphere every single day, spewing it up there as if the atmosphere of the planet is an open sewer, free to use, free of charge. Just put as much junk up there as you want to, notwithstanding the fact that it is causing these extreme weather events. Dirty energy causes dirty weather, and we have to come to our senses and do something about it. There's 4% more water vapor in the atmosphere above the oceans than there was just 30 years ago. And when storms bring this water vapor in, they reach out 2,000 kilometers, and they funnel it toward the place inland where the storm conditions release a downpour. And the warmer oceans make the winds stronger and more extensive. Katrina was 300 miles wide. This storm was 900 miles wide. Yeah, it was only a Category 1, but the barometric pressure was the lowest that any storm has ever had north of the old Mason-Dixon line. And the consequences, of course, have been tragic. But we have had 11 huge disasters related to climate that have cost more than $1 billion. And this was the second once-in-a-100-year storm in 14 months here in this city. My home city of Nashville, 2 years ago, thousands of my neighbors lost their homes and businesses and had no flood insurance because it had never, ever flooded in the areas affected. Pakistan, 20 million people driven from their homes, further destabilizing a nuclear-armed country. Russia, the worst fires and drought in the 1,000 years of recorded records, driving food prices worldwide to an all-time high. Australia, an area flooded the size of France and Germany combined. This year in the United States, 65% of our country in drought. Deutsche Bank estimates 1 percentage point off the country's GDP because of that drought. Many areas still in drought. What will it take for the national government to wake up, as this mayor has been telling us to do, and as he has been preparing this city? On a national level, ladies and gentlemen, to use a computer term, our democracy has been hacked. It no longer functions as it is intended to serve the public interest. And when the large carbon polluters and their ideological allies tell the members of Congress to jump, they do say, how high? And we need leadership in the executive branch as well. I deeply respect our president, and I'm grateful for the steps that he has taken. But we cannot have 4 more years of mentioning this occasionally and saying it's too bad that the Congress can't act. I know how tough it is. He's done more in his first 4 years than any other administration has ever done, and I respect that and acknowledge that. But the time has long since passed for us to get moving. This country is the only nation that can provide global leadership, and the dysfunctional governance globally is directly related to the dysfunction of the government here in our own country. And ultimately, it all comes back to us. We have to send the message, yeah, it's time to act. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am proud and honored to be here with Mayor Mike Bloomberg, because among the mayors of this nation and this world, he stands out. I don't know of anybody who has done more. Plan YC has already been a tremendous success, and it is still unfolding. I remember, Mr. Mayor, when you and I stood on one of the rooftops of this city not too many years ago as part of your Green Roofs program. That one was actually white, and we took out the paint, the rollers and the paint, and it was a symbolic action, but it was part of a very real plan that has made a real difference. The mayor has set goals for this city to reduce its own greenhouse gas emissions by 30% by 2030, and already has cut them by 16%. He has also served admirably as chairman of the C40, taking the lessons he's learned and the leadership that he has inspired in this city to cities around the country. He created the panel on climate change. Already of the 1 million trees promised, 600,000 have been planted. The wetland strategy and the green infrastructure plan, all of these are examples of his great leadership. And today, as he will present to you more leadership still, I am really proud to call Mike Bloomberg a friend. And for those of you who live in this great city, I will say again, I think you are extremely fortunate to have the leadership of Mayor Mike Bloomberg, who I am proud to introduce now. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Please. Thank you. Thank you. Please. It's embarrassing, but you could keep going. That's okay.
Well, good morning, everyone. And Mr. Vice President, thank you. Your leadership and vision really has helped inspire action on climate change, not just here in the United States, but by cities and countries and consumers around the world. No one, I think, has done more to raise the public consciousness of this issue or to press for change on an international stage. And I want to thank you for coming here and lending your voice to our efforts to prepare New York City for the new realities that we face. I do remember when we were up on a roof. For those of you that don't realize what we're talking about, if you paint your roofs white, it reflects the sun, and in a 5-story building, it reduces the total energy needs of that building, because in the summer it costs a lot to air condition, by something like a quarter. It is an amazing thing. And the next time you take off from LaGuardia or from Kennedy, if you get lucky and the plane banks over New York City, you'll be shocked at the percentage of roofs that today are white. It's got to be something north of 80%. And if you look in a block, everybody's got their roofs painted white, and there's one that's not, and you wonder, what on earth is that person thinking? A few cans of paint, and they can have a dramatically lower bill. Kevin Burke from Con Ed won't be happy about that, but you really can make a difference. I also want to thank Mike Brune from the Sierra Club for joining us today. I think clearly the response to the storm is of national importance, both environmentally and economically, and the Sierra Club has made a difference, and Bloomberg Philanthropies is pleased, mainly at the instigation of Britt Agawala, who, along with Dan Doctoroff, is responsible for Plan YC, and Patty Harris, our first deputy mayor, for helping give the Sierra Club the resources to really make a difference. If we could get rid of coal as a basic energy source in America, you would make more of a difference in the amount of greenhouse gases that we spew into the air than any of the 10 things put together. And so far, the Sierra Club has a phenomenal record. They've stopped virtually all new plants, and now, along with our help, but also the aid of low-cost natural gas, have forced an awful lot of power plants to convert to natural gas. 2 days ago, last week I was down in Washington to lobby for money for New York City's recovery efforts, and as you fly into National Airport, you fly over this enormous power plant just upwind from Washington, D.C., that used to be coal-fired. And the whole field where they stored all their coal, all the coal is gone. You wonder what Congress was thinking, given they were downwind and breathing the air, but that might explain some of their behavior lately. I'm not sure of that. Anyways, I also want to thank Marcia Bistron and the League of Conservation Voters and Bob Yarrow and the Regional Plan Association for sponsoring this breakfast, although I will say I didn't get any food. I don't know about anybody else. And seriously for being strong partners with our administration on environmental issues. And I also want to thank all the employees of this hotel and the Marriott family and everyone here in the downtown community. The recovery that they did downstairs, I walked through some of the back rooms and you can see the water line. It's amazing the way people can recover. We are a city of survivors. We are a city that believes. The people here are just the kind of people that say, let's go do it. I think it was Mike that talked about the trash outside of houses down on the Jersey Shore. You should go out to the Rockaways, for example, Breezy Point, Coney Island, the southern shore of Staten Island. There are no piles of debris. And the reason there are no piles of debris is that our sanitation department has removed something like I think the numbers are north of 350,000 tons of debris that were removed. And you go down block after block and you say, oh, there was no damage here. If you look carefully, you'll notice there's no electricity yet, and people had enormous damage from floods inside. But outside, the sanitation department has done a wonderful job. And the evolution of who were the heroes in our city, it started out with the fire department and police department saving lives. And then a few days later, it was the police department that was making sure that everybody was safe at night. And then it became the sanitation department and all the work that they have done. And then it became the volunteers. And it's just a natural progression. But in the end, the real heroes were the people of New York City. We were the ones that invested in the future. We have the greatest police department in the world, the greatest fire department in the world, the greatest sanitation department in the world. They're well equipped, they're well trained, they know how to go into danger when the rest of us are walking away, and they've really made a very big difference. And other cities, you can see, don't have the same thing. I visited a sewage treatment plant in the Rockaways last week, and this is a plant that's very low, had to be shut down. We shut it down for 2 days. 2 days later, it came right back up, and it worked. And you read stories about sewage treatment plants in other places that have been out since the storm and are still spewing all of the sewage into our rivers and into the water. It's fair to say that in the city's long history, we've never had a storm like Sandy. We've had storms with higher winds, but we've never had a storm that was like this one. Water levels at the Battery reached 14 feet. FEMA has estimated that there was less than a 1% chance of that happening. And just for the record books, back in 1960, highest before the 14 feet was 11 feet. This was a perfect storm, a hurricane that coincided with a full moon and a high tide, and it collided with a second weather front that made it take a hard left turn at the worst possible place. When the storm turned left into the center of New Jersey, that put us on the northeastern side of the winds. All of you from your physics classes in high school and college remember winds in the northern hemisphere go counterclockwise around the low-pressure area, and that drove the water right towards New York City. We would have been better off if it had gone any other place, but that wasn't to be, and we did have devastation, and sadly 43 people died in this. Now, we may or may not see another storm like Sandy in our lifetimes, but I don't think it's fair to say that we should leave it to our children to prepare for the possibility. We are a coastal city, a harbor city, surprise, surprise, and sea levels are expected to rise to another 2.5 feet by the time a child born today reaches 40 years old, and that's going to make surges even more powerful and dangerous. And intense storms are likely to increase as the ocean temperatures continue to rise. Al described in real detail of what's going to happen here. The droughts in the center of the country are caused by changes in the weather. You can argue about what caused the weather to change, but there is no question you can measure the temperatures of the ocean, you can measure the amount of moisture in the air, and that just leads to the kind of aberrations that we're seeing. Snowstorms we didn't have them before, droughts where we didn't have them before, hurricanes that take different paths, go in different directions, and have different strengths. We cannot solve the problems associated with climate change on our own here in New York City, but I think it's fair to say that we can lead the way. We have been both locally and globally. New York City has always been a leader. As Ed Koch once said, New York City is where the future comes to audition. And we have a responsibility, I've always thought, to help the rest of the world. You can go right back to life expectancy here in New York City is now 3 years greater than the average across America. One of the reasons for that is smoking cessation. California banned smoking in public places and nobody paid attention. New York City did it, and a very big part of the rest of the world followed in doing exactly the same thing. We are a leader, we have a responsibility, and I think we're living up to that. Now, over the past 5 years, in partnership with Speaker Christine Quinn and the City Council, we've reduced the city's carbon footprint by 16%, and we're well on our way of meeting our goal of a 30% reduction by 2030. I did the calculation of just how old I'm going to be in 2030, but I do plan to be around to watch that. And through the C40 Climate Group, which is a coalition of many of the world's largest cities, we've worked with mayors around the world to share strategies and innovative ideas. Cities are not waiting for national governments to act on climate change, and whether or not one storm is related to climate change or is not, we have to manage 4 risks, and we have to be able to better defend ourselves against extreme weather and natural disasters. We don't know whether the next emergency will be a storm, a drought, a tornado, a blizzard, but we do know that we have to be better prepared for all of them. And we also know that every one of those events is not going to come exactly the ways that we had prepared for. We need to make sure that we have people who are well-trained, well-equipped, and able to react in an emergency and to deal with whatever nature throws at us, even if we hadn't predicted it. In fact, the city that we know today exists, I think it's fair to say, only because New Yorkers who came before us responded to tragedy and adversity with inspired vision and impressive results. For example, the Great Fire of 1835 burned much of Lower Manhattan to the ground, partly because the fire department did not have access to an adequate water supply. And in response to that, New York City and New York State dammed the Croton River in Westchester County and built an extensive aqueduct system to deliver water to the city. It was one of the great engineering achievements of its time, but it left the city able to prepare to deal with a big fire later on. When the Great Blizzard of 1888 paralyzed the city's elevated trains, it proved to be a catalyst for creating the largest underground subway network in the country. The Triangle's Shirtwaist Fire of 1911 that killed 146 garment workers was one of the deadliest industrial accidents in American history. And in response, New York City leaders led the effort to adopt new health and fire safety codes, new restrictions on child labor, and other workplace protections that became models for the progressive era. And after the terrorist attacks of 9/11, we built the largest counterterrorism operation of any city in the world. And this city is protected by the NYPD, and we brought Lower Manhattan back faster and stronger than anyone thought possible. Between the NYPD and the Port Authority Police Department, we are safe, and that's something that a lot of other places can't say. After each one of these calamities, New Yorkers recognized that the city had to survive and thrive, and we're only going to do that if we adapt. And in each case, New Yorkers put politics as usual aside and set a new course that would redefine the future of our city. Today, we come together in the same spirit because, like those earlier generations, we believe in the promise of our city. We believe that tomorrow can be better than today, and we know that it's up to us to make it so. And rather than talk about it and have plans that never get fulfilled, we're actually doing something. Even as our recovery operations remain a top priority, we now have enough perspective to begin taking stock of what we did well and what we can and must do better the next time. Over the past 5.5 weeks, we've mobilized the most comprehensive disaster relief efforts any locality has ever put together, and I can't say enough about all of the city employees, volunteers, and incidentally members of the New York State National Guard who have been working around the clock to help communities clean up and recover. I've always said that the city's nearly 300,000 employees form the most talented, dedicated workforce in the world, and they've certainly shown that over the past 6 weeks. But we can always learn from experience. And make no mistake about it, the federal government, through Homeland Security and FEMA, was there when we needed them. The Navy showed up, the Army showed up, the Marines showed up, the Coast Guard showed up. We had help from every part of the federal government. Everything we ever asked for, they delivered right away. Now we've got to get some money out of them, but that's another issue. I think we've certainly proven that we can do better. After Hurricane Irene, we expanded Zone A to include all of the Rockaways, City Island, and Hamilton Beach, and thank God we did, because it meant that they were ordered to evacuate, which probably saved lives. But Sandy surged beyond Zone A into Garrison Beach, into Howard Beach, and into East Williamsburg. And so now we've got to re-examine the evacuation zones and update them to reflect the new reality that we face. We also have to examine how we can deliver social services even more quickly and effectively, and what steps hospitals and critical care facilities need to take to better prepare for the loss of power. NYU Hospital and our Health and Hospitals Corporation, led by Al Aviles, conducted one of the largest critical care evacuations ever undertaken without the loss of a single life at NYU, Bellevue, or Coney Island Hospital, which I think really is a testament to the dedication of everyone on the hospital staff. We searched the records, and we couldn't really find any other hospitals of that size that had evacuated without real collateral damage, without people really getting hurt and worse. To look at these issues and many others, this morning I directed Deputy Mayor Kaz Holloway and Deputy Mayor Linda Gibbs to conduct a comprehensive after-action review of our preparedness measures and recovery operations. They'll focus on how we can improve the way we mobilize and deploy resources and essential services before, during, and after a major disaster. They'll consult widely with outside experts and with local community stakeholders impacted by the storm, and they'll present me with a full report and recommendations by the end of February, which we will then make public. Now, as we look back on the past 5 weeks, we'll also start looking ahead at the longer-term recovery challenges that we face across the city, especially in the hard-hit areas. When the storm finally died down on Tuesday, October 30th, I went to Breezy Point, and it really was hard to believe the level of destruction there, and it was heartbreaking to see. When I was there, I ran into Congressman Bob Turner and his wife, Peggy, at the site where their home had stood less than 24 hours before. And I stood with Fire Commissioner Sal Cassano, whose firefighters were still then performing search and rescue missions. I committed to them and many others who gathered that day that we would take special care of those who lost their homes. And since then, we've been working with communities to make sure that everyone who needs temporary housing gets it, and everyone who needs help in fixing up their house gets it. As we speak, there are teams that we call rapid repair teams, composed of more than 1,600 skilled trades workers, fixing wiring and other systems so that families can get back in their homes as quickly as possible. If you go out and you try to do it on your own, there just aren't enough plumbers, electricians, and carpenters around, and you're not sure how to contract with them and what's a fair price to pay. We are taking that responsibility on. We've got over 10,000 people that have signed up for this program. We will send the carpenter out. We will send the plumber out. We will send the electrician out. We'll fix your wiring, get you back on the power grid. We'll get you hot water again. We'll get you heat in your house. And the good news is FEMA has agreed to pay for the whole thing. Now, there were 200 homes that were destroyed or are beyond repair, in addition to more than 5 other homes that really have major structural damage and need real repairs. The rebuilding process will take an enormous undertaking. It will be an enormous undertaking, and not just for homeowners, but for entire communities. Over the past 5 weeks, we've taken some important steps to help communities cope with major disruptions. For instance, we created new ferry service from the Rockaways on the South Shore of Staten Island to Manhattan. And with generous help from the private sector and donors to the Mayor's Fund to Advance New York City, we've raised more than $42 million. But we've put together a $70 million assistance package for small businesses and nonprofits to help them begin the work of recovery. And through these and other efforts with our state and federal partners, we've helped more than 1,000 small businesses and hundreds of nonprofits with grants, loans, and other assistance. And I will say that Governor Cuomo has been with us every single step of the way, and we couldn't ask for more help from the state. But we do know that the hardest hit communities are going to need more individualized and targeted resources, both in the short term and in the long term. At the same time, adapting to climate change is a citywide challenge, not just a coastal challenge. We have to re-examine all of our major infrastructure in light of Sandy and how we can adapt and modernize it in order to protect it. So today, I have directed someone with extensive experience in both infrastructure and development and community revitalization, Seth Pinsky, the president of the Economic Development Corporation, to develop concrete recovery plans for the communities Sandy hit hardest, as well as specific and comprehensive action plans to prepare our city for the climate risks that we face. Deputy Mayors Kaz Holloway and Bob Steele will directly oversee this work, and our entire City Hall team, especially our Office of Long-Term Planning and Sustainability, will be deeply involved. And I'm glad to say that joining us in this work, we recruited Mark Ricks, who is a former member of our administration who now works for Goldman Sachs on infrastructure issues. Goldman has agreed to let Mark Ricks take a leave of absence in order to serve the city once again, and I wanted to thank both of them and Seth for stepping up to this challenge. Now, this is not work that can be done overnight, but it is work that must begin immediately where the need is greatest. So in each of the hardest hit areas, Seth and our team will work with local leaders to develop and implement comprehensive community recovery and building plans. The plans will cover everything from public and private housing to hospitals and schools to transportation and parks to businesses and nonprofits, including cultural institutions like the New York Aquarium. To succeed, the plans must include the input of the people who live and work in these communities, and they will. Members of the community will assist in shaping and implementing each community plan, and that will be just the beginning of our work. The biggest challenge that we face is adapting our city to risks associated with climate change, and meeting that challenge will require us to take a leap into the future. But I think, as Al pointed out, the good news is, compared to any other American city, we've got a running head start. Since Dan Doctoroff and Rit Aggarwala launched Plan YC in 2007, we've taken a number of important steps for rising sea levels and the possibility of increasingly intense storms. For instance, we created a $2.4 billion green infrastructure plan that uses natural methods of capturing rainwater before it can flood our communities and overwhelm our sewage system. With support from the City Council and Christine Quinn, we adopted new zoning regulations that eliminate penalties for elevating boilers, generators, and other electrical equipment above the ground. And we're in the process of restoring 127 acres of wetland, which is perhaps the best natural barriers against storms that we have. And we're expanding the Staten Island Blue Belt, which is also a natural drainage system, by some 325 acres. For major development in vulnerable areas, we now require a climate risk assessment, and that's why the developers of Willets Point and those building the new recycling facility in Red Hook are required to elevate development out of the floodplain. And it's why the park being built on Governor's Island is being elevated by 4 feet, and I'm happy to say it sustained no major structural damage in the storm, nor did Brooklyn Bridge Park, which we designed specifically to withstand major storms, and I'm happy to say that it did. For the most part, the waterfront development that has taken place over the past decade has withstood the storm in pretty good shape because of the environmental standards we adopted. The new homes in Greenpoint, Williamsburg, and Arverne by the Sea and the Rockaways all suffered relatively little damage, and our development site at Hunters Point South in Queens, which is on the East River, also did well, even though there was a major flooding just a few blocks away. One of the people who deserve the real credit for the resilience of our development, new developments, is the guy who I am very happy to say President Obama has put in charge of the region's recovery and rebuilding, HUD Secretary Sean Donovan. Sean, as many of you know, was our housing commissioner from 2004 to 2009. I wasn't thrilled when the administration took him to Washington, but at least he's able to once again serve our city, and he's going to be a big help to us and to Seth Pinsky and his team as we continue the work of making our city more resilient. New York City has 520 miles of shoreline, and it is some of the most beautiful, dynamic shoreline in the world with the most beautiful views. Robert Moses has built these roads along our coastline, separating us from this natural resource. And we have worked very hard to try to reconnect back to the most wonderful asset that we have. It's also why people have chosen to live at the coastline for centuries. And it's why the question I've gotten most often since the storm is not about the damage Sandy caused, but about whether people can rebuild their homes in places like Breezy Point and Midland Beach. Let me be clear. We are not going to abandon the waterfront. We're not going to leave the Rockaways or Coney Island or Staten Island South Shore. But we can't just rebuild what was there and hope for the best. We have to build smarter and stronger and more sustainably. And Seth and his team will be working with all of our city agencies and lots of outside experts to determine exactly what that means. For instance, even though the city has already revised the building code to strengthen standards for flood protection, we will now do it again. The fact is, 2/3 of all homes damaged by Sandy are outside of FEMA's existing 100-year flood maps. Here's the existing 100-year FEMA and 500-year FEMA flood maps, last updated in 1983. And you can see the 100-year flood zone in yellow and the 500-year flood zone extending out of it in orange. Now, here is where Hurricane Sandy actually flooded in red. As you can see, the yardstick has changed, and so must we. FEMA is currently in the process of updating their maps, and those maps will guide us in setting new construction requirements. And will add new structural requirements to ensure that buildings can withstand the intense winds and waves that we expect down the road. But we'll also make sure that our zoning regulations don't penalize homeowners for elevating their houses out of the floodplain. There are height restrictions in most of these areas for 1- and 2-family houses, so we'll work with Speaker Quinn and the City Council to increase those height restrictions so people can elevate their homes and still build back what they lost. And we'll also work with the Council to allow small businesses that are in residential zones to rebuild so long as they invest in flood mitigation measures. No matter how much we do to make homes and businesses more resilient, the fact of the matter is we live next to the ocean, and the ocean comes with risks that we just cannot eliminate. Over the past month, there's been a lot of discussion about seawalls, and it really would be nice if we could stop the tides coming in. But King Canute couldn't do it, and neither can we, especially if, as many scientists project, sea levels continue rising. However, there may be some coastline protections that we can build and will mitigate the impact of a storm surge with berms and dunes, jetties and levees. And on October 23rd, 1 week before Sandy hit, you should know that our Office of Long-Term Planning and Sustainability initiated a formal request to the Army Corps of Engineers to evaluate additional ways that we could reduce the impact of coastal storms. A full Army Corps study will take 3 to 5 years to complete, and that does not include the required engineering analysis, which can also take years. And I've said we just cannot wait that long. So we will launch an expedited engineering analysis of coastal protection strategies to ensure we pursue the ones that are right for our city. But remember, there are no panaceas or magic bullets. No matter what we do, the tides will continue to come in, and so we have to make our city more resilient in other ways, especially when it comes to our critical infrastructure. During Hurricane Sandy, all our major infrastructure networks failed, and they have taken just too long to come back online. Our long-term planning and sustainability team have been working with many of these network operators to assess their vulnerabilities. We know, for example, that a substantial portion of the city's critical electrical infrastructure is in the 100-year flood plan, and so I've directed Seth to work with Sergei Manovsky and our sustainability team to assess what it takes to make every essential network that supports our city capable of withstanding a Category 2 hurricane or a record-breaking heat wave or other natural disasters. And that includes our transportation network, our power network, our gas network, our telecommunications network, and our hospital network. What will it take to ensure that, even if a Category 2 hurricane or a record heat wave comes? What will each of these networks be required to remain operational? How much will it cost? And what standards should be set for bringing networks back quickly so that residents and businesses can have reasonable expectations about how long they may be out of service? In addition, how can we ensure continuity of operations, not just of our critical infrastructure, but of critical industries? Many businesses, including New York Stock Exchange, remain closed for days because not enough people could get to work. In all fairness, the New York Stock Exchange did have generators. They were perfectly capable of opening, but they can't open without their employees. In a wireless world, we have to do a better job, not only of keeping our networks up, but keeping our markets and businesses open, come hell or high water. Many of our key infrastructure networks are run by private companies, as you know, but they have contracts, franchises, and licenses to provide public service. And the public does have a right to establish clear benchmarks for their performance in a disaster. And that's why we reached out to the CEOs of Con Ed, National Grid, Verizon, AT&T, Time Warner, Hess, and others, and asked them to work with us on this effort. All have pledged their unqualified support. In fact, since 2008, all of them have been working with the Climate Adaptation Task Force we formed to find ways to harden our critical infrastructure. But let's remember, we will have to decide how to allocate scarce dollars. With unlimited funds, you really can build an airplane that is impossible to crash. Unfortunately, it'd be too heavy to get off the ground, and it would be too expensive to take. We have to live in the real world and make tough decisions based on the costs and benefits of risk avoidance investments. Saying we're going to spend whatever it takes just is not realistic. As this planning work begins, we'll also have to look to identify steps we can take immediately. For instance, Con Ed recognizes that in order to withstand a Category 2 hurricane, it needs to significantly harden its electric, gas, and steam systems. And to do that, today I'm glad to announce that Con Ed has committed to moving forward in the current months with an initial investment of $250 million. And I did want to thank Con Ed's CEO, Kevin Burke, for joining us in this effort and his leadership over the past 6 weeks, and also all the work that Con Ed has done over the last couple of years. 3 or 4 years ago, we had big blackouts and brownouts in this city when it became hot in the summer. We just had a record hot summer, and we had almost no blackouts. So a lot of their work, a lot of their investment is really paying off. And it's exactly the kind of thing that we need all utilities to do. We also work to modernize our energy and infrastructure by incentivizing large buildings and hospitals to invest in cogeneration systems, which allow them to generate their own heat and power. That has worked to a great extent. And we will work with Governor Cuomo to explore how we can accelerate investments in distributed energy, microgrids, energy storage, and smart grid technologies, and to strengthen our communications infrastructure. We're just going to have to explore how we can tap into mobile telecommunications trucks. In an age of fiber optics, we can't be so dependent on traditional copper wiring. And Verizon, I think, learned that lesson during Sandy, which took out an astonishing 95% of their copper network in downtown Manhattan. They are now rebuilding better and smarter with fiber, but full restoration will take months. I had a long conversation last night with Lowell McAdam, who is the CEO of Verizon. Their schedule right now says that Lower Manhattan is not going to be back up until May, and I pointed out that is just not acceptable. And together we've worked out a plan where the city can help them get access into buildings and other things that you wouldn't think about so that Verizon can accelerate that. Those buildings in downtown that lost electricity and power and heat should be back up by the end of this month. But they can't be occupied unless we have telephone service, and that's going to be our #1 priority for downtown. Even today, 5 weeks after the storm, there are just too many people who cannot come back to work here. We don't want them moving anyplace else, and they need to earn a living, and we need their services. And a growing number of New Yorkers, as we all know, today are relying on wireless networks and abandoning landline telephones. We cannot in the future have cell towers that have only 8 hours of backup battery power. That is just not acceptable in the world that we live today. The telephone is our lifeline. The telephone is a lifeline not just to business, but to our own physical security. It has to keep working. Now, we'll take on all of these efforts, but we also have to be mindful not to fight the last war and miss the new one ahead. Record rainfalls in our watershed over the past 3 summers may sound good to you who are worried about our reservoirs being full, but because the rains were so strong, large portions of our water supply were out of commission for months at a time. You didn't notice it because this city has invested an enormous amount of money over many administrations in buying land around the reservoirs and new reservoirs and money into the conduits, the aqueducts that bring the water to us. We were able to keep the service going seamlessly, but there's a limit to how much we can do. Record heat in 2011 led to the highest energy use ever recorded in our city. And as I said before, the electric grid held up, but massive voltage reductions were required throughout our power network to keep the lights on. And we could just as easily see drier conditions that lead to a drought. So the work that we'll do to prepare for our city for all types of extreme weather is just beginning, and it's not just storms. You don't have to be a believer in climate change to understand that the dangers from extreme weather are already here. And the risks that climate change is driving these extreme weather patterns must compel us to act, both to prevent climate change and to prepare for it. Here's an example of those cool roofs that Al and I created. Al, you look great there. I don't think I got any paint on my shoes. I was really worried about that. We had volunteers painting roofs, and then other people read about it, and they go and they do it on their own because it is in their interest. New Yorkers have never been shy about taking on big challenges and taking our destiny into our own hands. And I have every confidence that by confronting this challenge head-on, we will succeed, just as we have so many times before. There is no storm, no fire, no terrorist act that can destroy the spirit of our city and keep us from looking forward, envisioning a better tomorrow, and then bringing it to life. The future is in our hands, and I'm 100% confident they're in good hands, and we will deliver. Thank you all very much. And Al, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice President, thank you for your remarks. Michael, thank you for your remarks. We at RPA and at the League look forward to working with all of you to move ahead with that very ambitious agenda. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And thank you, all of you, for coming.
Yes, thank you.